The widow Theresa Ashford stood in the doorway of her crumbling cabin, watching the October wind tear another section of wooden shingles from what remained of her roof, scattering them across the dirt yard like autumn leaves. 3 pairs of eyes watched from behind her skirts, her children pressed close against the evening chill that already promised a brutal winter ahead in Palisade, Colorado. She had buried Samuel 6 months ago, watching the pine box disappear into the hard ground while her 7-year-old daughter Emma stood silent as stone, while 5-year-old Matthew clung to her leg, and while baby Grace nursed at her breast, too young to understand that the fever had taken their father and left them with nothing but debts and this failing structure that could barely be called a home. The cattle had been sold to pay what they owed at the general store, the good horses traded for seed that went into ground too dry to yield much of anything. And now the roof was giving up, just as the first real cold began to settle into the valley. Theresa pulled her shawl tighter, calculating in her mind how many more nights they could manage with blankets hung over the holes before the snow came. She had pride enough not to beg, but precious little else. At 26 years old, she felt ancient, worn down by grief and worry and the constant mathematics of survival. "Mama, I am cold," Matthew said, his voice small. "I know, sweetheart. Let us go inside and I will make us something warm." She heated water over the fire, rationing the coffee she had left to make it weak enough to stretch another week, and tried not to think about the winter that was coming or the roof that was going. The children ate the cornbread she had made that morning, and she told herself she was not hungry even though her stomach disagreed. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind whistle through the gaps in the ceiling, watching stars appear through the holes where shingles used to be, and she prayed without much hope that somehow they would make it through to spring. She did not know that 3 miles away, a cowboy named Kent Dalton was bedding down in the bunkhouse at the Double R Ranch, unable to sleep because he kept thinking about the woman he had seen in town that afternoon, standing outside the post office with her 3 children, mending a tear in her son's jacket right there on the street, because apparently it could not wait until she got home. There had been something in her face, a fierce determination mixed with exhaustion, that had stayed with him all through the evening meal and into the dark hours. Kent was 31, a drifter by nature who had spent 15 years moving from ranch to ranch, working cattle drives and breaking horses, sleeping under stars more often than roofs. He had never wanted to settle, never saw the point in putting down roots when there was always another town over the next ridge, another job, another sunrise in a different place. But lately something had been changing in him, a restlessness that felt different from the old wanderlust, a sense that maybe all this moving was just running from something he had not yet named. He had asked around about her in the bunkhouse, casual-like, and learned that she was Samuel Ashford's widow, that she was trying to hold onto the homestead out past Willow Creek, that she had 3 young ones and no man to help her. The ranch hand spoke of her with respect, noting that she had not remarried or given up, though plenty would have done both by now. Kent did not examine too closely why he cared. He told himself it was simple Christian charity, the kind of thing any decent person would concern themselves with. But when he rose before dawn 2 days later and saddled his horse, loading his saddlebags with tools and heading out toward Willow Creek, instead of toward the north pasture where he was supposed to be riding fence, he knew he was lying to himself. The Ashford place was worse than he had imagined. The cabin sagged in the middle, the barn had a hole in its side big enough to ride through, and the roof looked like it had been attacked by a bear. He sat on his horse for a long moment, taking it all in, wondering what the hell he thought he was doing here. Then the door opened and she stepped out, and his heart did something strange in his chest. Theresa froze when she saw the stranger sitting astride a roan gelding in her yard. She had learned to be cautious around men she did not know, especially out here where there were no neighbors close enough to hear her scream. Her hand moved instinctively to the door frame, where Samuel's rifle stood just inside. "Morning, madam," Kent said, removing his hat. "Name is Kent Dalton. I work at the Double R." She studied him with wary eyes, taking in his worn canvas jacket, the rope coiled on his saddle, the honest dust on his boots. "I did not send for anyone from the Double R." "No, madam, you did not." He gestured toward the roof. "But I was passing by, and I could not help but notice you have got some trouble up there." "I can manage my own troubles, Mr. Dalton." "I am sure you can," he said, and there was no mockery in his voice, just a straightforward acknowledgement. "But winter is coming on hard and fast, and those children of yours are going to need a roof over their heads that does not let in snow." Theresa's jaw tightened. "I do not have money to pay you." "Did not ask for money." "Then what do you want?" Kent settled his hat back on his head, considering the question. What did he want? He was not entirely sure himself. "Cup of coffee when the work is done, if you can spare it. That is all." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for the trick, the angle, the thing he was not saying. Men did not just help for nothing, not in her experience. But his eyes were steady and clear, and she could see the holes in her roof getting bigger with every passing day, and pride was a luxury she could not afford anymore. "I have coffee," she said finally, "but it is not very strong. Weak coffee is better than no coffee, madam." He swung down from his horse and began unloading his saddlebags. She watched him, still suspicious, as he laid out hammers and nails, a saw, his rope. Emma appeared in the doorway behind her mother, peering around her skirts with wide, curious eyes. "You have got any lumber stored anywhere?" Kent asked. "Some in the barn, not much. Samuel was meaning to buy more before." She trailed off, before he passed. "I heard about that. I am sorry for your loss." The words were simple but sincere, and Theresa felt something unknot slightly in her chest. "Thank you. Let me see what you have got, and I will make do with what is here. Might need to ride into town for supplies, but I will cover that." "Mr. Dalton, I cannot let you." "You can and you will, madam, because those babies need a roof and I have got money in my pocket and no one depending on it." "Now, are you going to argue with me all morning, or are you going to let me get to work?" Despite herself, Theresa felt the ghost of a smile tug at her mouth. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such plain kindness, without pity or judgment, just straightforward human decency. "The barn is that way." Kent nodded and headed off to survey the lumber situation, and Theresa stood in her doorway watching him go, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake, or if maybe, just maybe, her prayers had been answered in the form of a dusty cowboy with calloused hands and a bedroll tied behind his saddle. Over the next 3 days, Kent worked on the roof from sunup to sundown. He discovered that the damage was more extensive than it had looked from the ground. Whole sections of support beams rotted through, the shingles not just missing but the underlying structure compromised. It was going to take more than patching. It was going to take rebuilding. He rode into Palisade and bought lumber with his own wages, loading it onto a rented wagon and hauling it back out to the Ashford place. Theresa protested again, more weakly this time, and he ignored her just as he had before. The children watched him work with fascination, especially Matthew, who brought him water and asked endless questions about hammers and nails and how to make things fit together just right. "You have got to measure twice and cut once," Kent told the boy, letting him hold the end of the measuring tape. "You waste good wood if you cut it wrong." "My papa used to say that," Matthew said, his small face serious. "Your papa was a smart man." Emma was more reserved, standing at a distance with her arms crossed, watching Kent with those solemn eyes that seemed too old for her 7 years. She reminded him of a young deer, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. He made no attempt to win her over, just worked steadily and spoke gently when she was near, letting her come to trust in her own time. Baby Grace was still too young to care about much beyond her next meal, but she smiled at him once from her mother's arms, a gummy, toothless grin that made something warm spread through his chest. And Theresa herself moved through each day like a woman waiting for the other shoe to drop, clearly unable to believe that this stranger was doing all this work without expecting something in return. She cooked what little she had and insisted he eat with them, setting out cornbread and beans, weak coffee, and once, as a treat, apple preserves she had been saving. "This is too much," Kent said, looking at the food she had laid out for him on the 4th evening. "You need this for your family." "You are doing too much," she countered. "And I will not have it said that Theresa Ashford does not feed a man who works an honest day." They stared at each other across the rough wooden table, and Kent saw the steel in her spine, the fierce pride that had kept her going when everything else had fallen apart. He understood in that moment that she needed to give him something, that accepting pure charity would break something in her. And so he nodded and sat down and ate the food she had prepared, complimenting it honestly because it was good despite the scarcity of ingredients. "You are a fine cook, madam. Theresa," she said quietly. "You can call me Theresa." "Kent," he replied, "though I guess you knew that." The children ate quickly, and Emma shepherded the younger two off to bed, leaving Kent and Theresa sitting in the lamplight, the evening stretching out between them. She poured him more coffee and then, hesitantly, sat down across from him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "And do not tell me it is just Christian charity. I have been to church enough to know that most Christians will pray for you, but they will not lift a hammer." Kent turned his cup in his hands, considering his answer. "I saw you in town last week, mending your boy's jacket on the street. You had this look on your face, like you were daring the whole world to say something about it. And I thought, there is a woman who is not going to quit. And then I heard about your situation, and I rode out here and saw this place falling down around you, and I just thought somebody ought to help. Somebody ought to do something. But why you?" "Because I was the one who saw you," he said simply. "Because I had the time and the skills and the money. Because maybe I am tired of just drifting through and not mattering to anyone." The honesty in his words caught her off guard, and she looked at him with new eyes, seeing not just the weathered cowboy but the lonely man underneath. "You matter," she said softly. "Not really. Not to anyone permanent. I have been moving from place to place for 15 years, and I could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice beyond needing to hire a new hand." "I would notice," Theresa said. "My children would notice. You are giving us our home back." Kent met her eyes and felt something shift between them, a recognition, a connection. He had not come here looking for anything beyond the satisfaction of a job well done, but sitting here in the lamplight with this woman who had survived so much and still had kindness in her eyes, he felt like maybe he had found something he had not known he was looking for. The moment stretched out, neither of them looking away, and then Grace cried out from the back room and Theresa rose quickly, the spell broken. "I should see to her. And I should get back to the ranch. Early start tomorrow. You are coming back." "Roof is not finished yet," he said, settling his hat on his head. "Still got work to do." He rode back to the Double R under a sky full of stars, and for the first time in his adult life, he found himself not wanting to move on, not looking toward the next horizon. He wanted to stay right here in this place, near that cabin and the woman who lived there with her fierce pride and her gentle hands. The work continued through the next week. Kent fell into a rhythm, rising early and riding out to the Ashford place, working through the day while Theresa managed the children and the garden and the 100 other tasks that filled her hours. Sometimes she brought him water, standing at the base of the ladder while he worked above, and they would talk about small things, the weather, the town, the way the aspens were turning gold on the mountainsides. Sometimes they talked about bigger things. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about the years of wandering that had followed. She told him about meeting Samuel at a church social in Denver, about the hope they had shared when they filed for this homestead, about the way that hope had slowly been ground down by drought and debt, and finally death. "I loved him," she said one afternoon, her voice distant. "But I am not going to pretend it was easy. This land takes everything you have and asks for more." "Why stay then?" "Because it is mine. Because I will be damned if I let this place beat me. Because my children deserve to grow up somewhere they can call home." Kent hammered in another nail, thinking about her words. "You are the toughest person I have ever met, you know that. I am just doing what needs to be done." "That is what makes you tough." By the end of the second week, the roof was finished. Kent stood back and surveyed his work, checking every joint, every shingle, making sure it was solid and true. It would hold through the winter, through the snows that would come, through whatever storms blew down from the high country. The children would be warm and dry, and that knowledge gave him a satisfaction deeper than anything he had felt in years. Theresa made a special dinner to celebrate, using some of the precious flour she had been hoarding to make biscuits, opening the last jar of her strawberry preserves. The children were giddy with excitement, Matthew chattering about how strong the roof looked, Emma actually smiling, Grace banging her spoon on the table. "To Kent," Theresa said, raising her cup of coffee in a toast. "Who gave us back our home?" "To Theresa," Kent countered, "who never gave up on it." They ate together as the sun set outside the window, golden light spilling across the table, and Kent tried to memorize every detail because he knew this moment could not last. The job was done. He had no reason to keep coming back, no excuse to spend his days here instead of doing the work he was actually being paid for at the Double R. After the children were in bed, he stood by his horse in the yard, delaying his departure. Theresa stood on the porch, wrapped in her shawl against the evening chill. "I guess this is it then," she said, and he could hear something uncertain in her voice. "I guess so. Roof is done, good and solid. Thank you. I know I have said it before, but I do not think I can say it enough. You saved us. You would have found a way. You are a survivor, maybe, but it would have been a lot harder without you." She paused, and then the words came out in a rush. "You could come back if you wanted to. For dinner, I mean, on Sunday maybe. I am making a chicken." Kent felt his heart lift. "A chicken, that sounds mighty fine. It is the least I can do after everything. It is not about owing me, Theresa. I would come back because I want to, because I like being here, because I like you and your children." The confession hung in the air between them. Theresa wrapped her shawl tighter, but she was smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Sunday then, around noon. I will be here." He rode back to the ranch feeling like a different man than the one who had set out 2 weeks ago. Something had changed in him, something fundamental. He was not just drifting anymore. He had found something worth staying for. Sunday came with clear skies and temperatures cold enough to make breath visible. Kent washed up carefully, put on his best shirt, the one without any holes or patches, and rode out to the Ashford place with his heart beating faster than it had any right to. He told himself it was just dinner, just a meal between friends, but he knew he was lying. The children greeted him with enthusiasm, especially Matthew, who grabbed his hand and pulled him inside to see a drawing he had made of the new roof. Emma was more reserved, but she smiled at him, and that felt like a victory. Grace reached up her chubby arms and he picked her up without thinking, settling her on his hip while Theresa worked at the stove. "Something smells amazing," he said. "I hope it tastes as good as it smells. I have not roasted a chicken in a while." The meal was everything she had promised and more. The chicken was tender and seasoned with herbs from her garden, and there were potatoes and carrots and actual butter on the biscuits. The children ate with the focused intensity of the perpetually hungry, and Kent made sure to compliment every dish, watching Theresa's cheeks flush with pleasure at his praise. After the meal, he helped her clean up while the children played outside in the autumn sunshine. They worked in companionable silence, washing and drying dishes, and Kent was struck by how domestic it felt, how right. He had never done dishes with a woman before, never stood in a kitchen that felt like home. "I have been thinking," Theresa said, her hands in the wash water, "about the barn. It needs work too before winter really sets in. I notice that. I cannot pay you. I still do not have any money. But if you wanted to, I mean if you had the time." She trailed off, not looking at him. Kent set down the dish he was drying. "Theresa, are you asking me to court you, or are you asking me to fix your barn?" She turned to face him, her hands dripping soapy water. "I do not know. Maybe both. I have not done this in a very long time, and I am not sure what I am doing. That makes two of us." He took a step closer. "But I would like to keep coming around if you are amenable to that. I would like to fix your barn and eat dinner with you and get to know your children better. I would like to see where this goes." "I have 3 children," she said, as if he might not have noticed. "And a failing homestead and no money and more problems than you can shake a stick at. I know all that. And you still want to court me. I do not want to court you because you are perfect, Theresa. I want to court you because you are real and strong and kind, because you fight for what matters and you do not quit even when you probably should. Because when I am here, I feel like I am where I am supposed to be." Theresa's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them away impatiently with the back of her hand. "I am sorry. I do not usually cry. It is all right. It has just been so hard for so long, and I did not think anyone would ever look at me like that again. Like I was worth something beyond just my ability to survive." Kent reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You are worth everything." She caught his hand and held it against her face for a moment, closing her eyes. Then she opened them and looked at him with something like hope. "Yes, yes, yes, you can court me. Yes, I would like that very much. Yes to all of it." He wanted to kiss her right then, wanted it more than he had wanted anything in a long time, but the children were just outside and it felt too soon, too fast. So instead he squeezed her hand and smiled and said, "Then I guess I better get started on that barn." Over the next month, Kent spent every spare moment at the Ashford place. He fixed the barn, patching the hole in its side and reinforcing the stalls. He repaired the corral fence, chopped wood for the winter, helped Theresa harvest the last of her garden before the hard frosts came. He brought supplies when he came, things he knew she needed, and learned how to present them in ways that did not wound her pride. He would say he had bought too much coffee by mistake, or that someone at the ranch was giving away extra flour, and she would accept these transparent fictions because it allowed her to take what she needed without feeling like a charity case. The children grew comfortable with him. Matthew followed him everywhere, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, learning to hammer and saw and measure. Kent taught him patiently, the way he wished someone had taught him when he was young. Emma slowly opened up, telling him about the books she loved, the stories she made up in her head. He listened like her words were important because they were. Grace called him Ken and reached for him when she saw him, and he discovered he had a talent for making her laugh. And Theresa, careful and cautious Theresa, began to let her guard down. They talked for hours after the children were asleep, sitting by the fire, sharing stories from their lives. She told him about her parents, both gone now, about growing up poor in Denver, about the dreams she had once had of a better life. He told her about Texas, about the loneliness of the trail, about all the empty years he had filled with movement instead of meaning. "You regret it?" she asked one night. "All that wandering?" "I did not until now. Now I think maybe I was just waiting to find a reason to stop." "And have you found a reason?" He looked at her in the firelight, at the way the flames painted gold across her face, at the softness in her eyes when she looked at him. "I have found several reasons, 4 of them, actually." She blushed and ducked her head, but she was smiling. "Kent Dalton, are you saying you are fond of my children?" "I am saying I am fond of all 4 of you, the whole package. We are quite a package. You are worth it." The first snow came in early November, big fat flakes that fell straight down in the still air, covering everything in white. Kent rode out to check on them, worried despite knowing the roof was sound, and found the children outside building a snowman while Theresa watched from the porch, wrapped in a blanket. "The roof is holding," she called to him as he dismounted. "Dry as a bone inside." "I figured it would, but I wanted to make sure." Matthew ran up to him, covered in snow, his face red with cold and excitement. "Look what we built." Emma helped. The snowman was lopsided and charming, with stones for eyes and a carrot nose. "That is mighty impressive work," Kent said seriously. "You have got real talent." He stayed for dinner, as he almost always did now, and after the children were in bed, he and Theresa sat by the fire. She was quiet, thoughtful, and he waited, giving her space to find her words. "Samuel has been gone 8 months now," she said finally. "And I have been thinking about what that means, about what I am allowed to feel." "You are allowed to feel whatever you feel. There are no rules. I loved him. I want you to know that. It was not always easy, but I loved him." "I know you did. But he is gone, and I am still here, and I am starting to have feelings for someone else. For you. And I do not know if that makes me a terrible person or just a practical one." Kent moved closer, taking her hand. "It makes you human. It makes you someone who deserves to be happy." "Do I deserve that?" "Yes, absolutely yes." She looked at him with those serious eyes searching his face. "I am afraid. What if I lose you too? What if I let myself care and something happens? You might. Life does not come with guarantees. But you could also not let yourself care and spend the rest of your life alone and safe and miserable. Is that what you want?" "No," she whispered. "I want to be brave enough to try again." "Then try." "I am not going anywhere, Theresa. I am here and I am staying, and I want to be part of your life. All of it, the good and the hard and everything in between." She leaned toward him and he met her halfway, and their first kiss was soft and sweet and tasted like hope. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. "I am a mess," she said, laughing a little. "You are perfect." They sat together by the fire, her head on his shoulder, and talked about the future for the first time. Kent told her he had been saving his wages, that he had enough to buy some cattle come spring, that he could help her make the homestead profitable again. She told him about her plans for the garden, about wanting to get chickens, about all the repairs that still needed doing. They talked until the fire burned down to embers, and when Kent finally rode back to the ranch in the dark hours before dawn, he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to marry this woman, that he was going to be a father to her children, that this was the life he had been looking for all along. The courtship continued through the winter months. Kent moved through his days at the Double R in a haze of contentment, working hard but always with his mind on the next Sunday, the next evening he could ride out to the Ashford place. The other ranch hands teased him about being lovesick, and he did not deny it. "You are going to marry that widow," his friend Jack said one night in the bunkhouse. "I am. When she is ready, when the time is right. What are you waiting for? You are already playing father to her kids." "I am waiting for her to be sure. She has been through a lot. I do not want to rush her." But Theresa was surer than he knew. She watched him with her children, saw how gentle he was with them, how patient. She saw how he fixed things without being asked, how he brought small gifts for the kids, how he looked at her like she hung the moon. And she felt her heart, that organ she thought had been frozen by grief, begin to thaw. One Sunday in late December, with snow piled high outside and the cabin warm from the fire, she sat Kent down after the children were asleep and said, "I want to marry you." He blinked, surprised. "I was going to ask you that, I know, but I wanted to be the one to say it first. I want you to know this is my choice, that I am choosing you. Not because I need someone to fix my roof or work my land, but because I love you, because you make me happy. Because when I think about the future, you are in it." Kent felt his throat get tight. "Theresa Ashford, are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am." "Is that too forward?" "It is perfect. You are perfect. And yes, I will marry you. I will marry you and love you and be a father to your children and build a life with you here on this land." She laughed, bright and joyful, and threw her arms around his neck. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solidity of her in his arms, and knew he was the luckiest man alive. They married in February on a cold, clear day, with the whole town of Palisade in attendance at the small church on Main Street. Emma stood up with her mother, solemn and proud in a new dress that Theresa had sewn. Matthew stood with Kent, chest puffed out with importance. Grace sat in the front pew with a neighbor, occasionally calling out during the ceremony, making everyone smile. Theresa wore a simple dress of deep blue, and Kent thought she had never looked more beautiful. When the Reverend said he could kiss his bride, he did so gently, reverently, and the congregation applauded. The celebration afterward was held at the town hall, with food brought by neighbors and music from a fiddle player. Kent danced with his new wife, with Emma, with various ladies from town who wanted to congratulate him. He felt like his face might split from smiling. "Happy?" Theresa asked him as they swayed to a slow tune. "Beyond words. Me too. I did not think I would ever feel this way again." "You deserve to be happy." "So do you." They left the celebration before dark, riding back to the homestead in a borrowed wagon with the children bundled in the back, and when they reached the cabin that was now Kent's home too, he carried Theresa over the threshold while the kids giggled. That night, after the children were asleep, Kent and Theresa lay together for the first time as husband and wife. They were tentative with each other, gentle, learning the landscape of new bodies and new needs. It was sweet and loving and deeply felt, and afterward they held each other in the darkness, listening to the wind outside and the sound of their children breathing in the next room. "This is real," Theresa whispered. "This is really happening. It is. We are a family now. We are." Kent fell asleep with his wife in his arms, and woke in the morning to the sound of children laughing and smelled coffee brewing, and thought that this ordinary beautiful morning, was everything he had never known he wanted. The months that followed were hard in the way that building a life is always hard, but they were also filled with joy. Kent moved his belongings from the bunkhouse to the cabin, fitting his life into the spaces Theresa made for him. He took over the heavy work of the homestead while continuing to work part-time at the Double R to bring in cash money. Theresa managed the house and the children and started planning for the spring garden. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. When a late spring storm damaged the new roof, they repaired it together. When the cow they bought had a difficult birth, they stayed up all night helping deliver the calf. When Matthew fell and broke his arm, they held him through the pain and the setting of the bone. And slowly, gradually, the homestead began to thrive. The garden produced abundantly under Theresa's care. The cattle Kent bought multiplied. They got chickens, then pigs, then a second cow. Money was still tight, but it was not desperate anymore. They had enough, and that felt like wealth. The children blossomed too. Matthew grew tall and strong, learning everything Kent could teach him about ranching and carpentry. Emma came out of her shell, laughing more, playing more, being the child she had not been able to be while her mother struggled alone. Grace grew from a baby into a toddler, and her first full sentence was, "I love you, Papa," directed at Kent, which made him cry when no one was looking. Because that was what he was now, Papa. Not their real father. He never tried to replace Samuel, but the father who was there now, the one who tucked them in and told them stories and taught them right from wrong. On a warm evening in June, more than a year after he had first ridden into their yard to fix a roof, Kent sat on the porch with Theresa watching the sun set over the mountains. Her hand rested on her belly, on the small swell that was just beginning to show. "You think it is a boy or a girl?" she asked. "I do not rightly care as long as you both come through healthy. I hope it is a boy. Matthew needs a brother, or Emma and Grace need another sister," she laughed. "Either way, this baby is going to be so loved." Kent put his arm around her and pulled her close. "Just like all of you, my whole family." "Your family," she repeated, savoring the words. "I like the sound of that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from gold to purple to deep blue. Inside, the children were playing some game that involved a lot of giggling. The cattle were lowing softly in the pasture. Somewhere a coyote called and another answered. "You ever miss it?" Theresa asked. "The wandering, the freedom of the trail." Kent thought about it honestly before answering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Just me and my horse and the horizon. But I do not miss the loneliness. I do not miss not mattering to anyone. And I have freedom here too, just a different kind. The freedom to build something that lasts. The freedom to love and be loved. I am glad you stopped wandering. I am glad you let me stay. I did not really let you, you just showed up and started fixing things. True, but you could have run me off. I thought about it," she admitted. "That first day I thought you must want something. Men always want something. I did want something. I just did not know it yet. And now I have everything I want right here." The baby was born in December, a healthy boy they named Samuel Thomas, after both his father and his grandfather. Kent held him in the minutes after his birth, this tiny, perfect creature, and felt the weight of responsibility and love settle over him like a mantle. "He looks like you," he told Theresa, who was exhausted but radiant. "He has your eyes," she said. Matthew and Emma and Grace crowded around to see their new brother, fascinated and gentle. "Can I hold him?" Emma asked, and Kent carefully transferred the baby to her lap, watching her face transform with wonder. "He is so small," Matthew said. "You were this small once," Theresa told him. "Really? Really?" Kent sat on the bed next to his wife and put his arm around her shoulders, and together they watched their children meet their new brother, and the circle of their family expanded to include one more. The years unfolded like the pages of a book, each season bringing its own challenges and gifts. They had good years and hard years, years when the cattle prices were high and years when drought threatened everything. But through it all, they had each other, and that made all the difference. Kent proved to be a natural father. He was patient and firm, loving and fair, teaching his children not just how to work but how to be good people. He taught Matthew to ride and rope, to treat animals with respect, to stand up for what was right. He taught Emma to read the weather and the seasons, to trust her own mind, to know her own worth. He taught Grace to be brave and kind, to laugh at trouble, to love fiercely. And young Samuel, who grew up knowing no father but Kent, absorbed everything like a sponge, following his papa around from the time he could walk, mimicking his gestures, his speech patterns, his values. Theresa watched her husband with their children and fell more in love with him every day. He was exactly the partner she needed, strong enough to help carry the load but secure enough to let her lead when she needed to. They made decisions together, fought rarely and fairly when they did, and never let the sun set on anger. On their 5th anniversary, Kent surprised her with a new stove, a beautiful black iron thing with chrome fixtures that he had been saving for over a year to buy. She cried when she saw it, not because of the stove itself, but because of what it represented. That he saw her work as valuable, that he wanted to make her life easier, that he paid attention to what she needed even when she did not ask. "You are too good to me," she said through her tears. "Impossible. I could never be good enough to match what you have given me. I have not given you anything but a bunch of mouths to feed and a run-down homestead. You gave me a home. You gave me a family. You gave me a purpose. You gave me love. That is everything." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as their own, and fell asleep wrapped around each other, content. More children came. Another daughter, Catherine, born in 1882, with Kent's dark hair and Theresa's stubborn chin. Then twin boys, Robert and James, born in 1884, who were hellions from day one but loved with the same fierce intensity as the rest of the family. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, Kent adding rooms as they needed them, until the simple structure he had first seen was a proper house with glass windows and a real wood floor. The homestead prospered, becoming one of the more successful operations in the valley. They never got rich, but they had enough and more than enough, abundance where there had once been scarcity. Kent's hair started going gray at the temples, and Theresa found lines around her eyes that had not been there before, but they wore their age well, comfortable in their bodies and their lives. They had built something real and lasting, something that would outlive them both. On a summer evening when Kent was 45 and Theresa was 40, they sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching their children play in the yard. Matthew was 21 now, courting a girl from town. Emma was 19, helping her mother with the younger kids and talking about becoming a teacher. Grace was 16 and beautiful, turning heads wherever she went, but with enough sense to not let it go to her head. Samuel was 8, Robert and James were 6, and Catherine was 8, all of them healthy and strong and loved beyond measure. "We did good," Kent said, reaching for Theresa's hand. "We did very good. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If I had not ridden out here that day, I try not to. It frightens me, thinking about how close I came to losing this place, losing everything. If you had not helped when you did, I do not know what would have happened to us. You would have survived. You are the strongest person I know." "Maybe. But I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you came along when you did, this wandering cowboy who decided to build me a roof without being asked. Best decision I ever made, mine too. Letting you stay, I mean, letting myself love you." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, and the land they had worked so hard to keep spread out around them, green and gold and abundant. Matthew came up onto the porch, tall and strong, so much like his father Samuel but with Kent's steady presence in his bearing. "Papa, one of the fences is down in the north pasture. Want me to fix it tomorrow? I will help you, Kent said. Early before it gets too hot. Yes, sir. After Matthew went back to join his siblings, Theresa squeezed Kent's hand. He called you Papa. I noticed. He used to call you Kent when you first came around. Now it is Papa, same as the little ones. Does that bother you? No, it makes me happy. Samuel would have wanted his children to have a good father, and they do. You are that father. Kent felt emotion swell in his chest. Even after all these years, her approval, her love, still moved him. I have tried to be worthy of them, of all of you. You are. You always have been. As darkness fell, they called the children inside, the whole noisy, beautiful crew of them, and Theresa made hot chocolate while Kent told stories by the fire. The younger children sat at his feet, entranced, while the older ones listened from the edges, pretending to be too grown up for such things but unable to resist. Later, when everyone was in bed and the house was quiet, Kent and Theresa lay together in their room, the window open to let in the cool night air. I love our life, Theresa said softly. So do I. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I cannot believe how lucky I am. That you walked into my life when I needed you most. That you stayed. That you loved not just me but all of us. I am the lucky one. I spent 15 years wandering around looking for something I could not name, and then I found you and realized what I had been missing was a home, a family, a place to belong. You belong here, with us. Forever. Forever, he agreed and kissed her softly. They made love quietly, mindful of the children sleeping in nearby rooms, and fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms the way they had done for years and would do for years to come. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. The children grew and changed, Matthew eventually marrying his sweetheart and building a house on the far edge of the property, starting his own family while staying close to the land he had grown up on. Emma did become a teacher, beloved by her students for her patience and creativity. Grace married a good man from Denver and moved to the city, though she came home often to visit. The younger children grew toward their own futures, each finding their own path while staying rooted in the values their parents had taught them. Kent and Theresa grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies becoming less spry but their love deepening with every passing year. They had lived through so much together, weathered every storm, celebrated every victory, and through it all they had remained partners, lovers, friends. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the homestead for a celebration. All the children were there, even Grace, who came out from Denver with her husband and 2 babies. Matthew brought his wife and their 3 kids. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, 3 generations together. After the meal, Kent stood and raised his glass of cider. I want to say something, he announced, and the room quieted. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was a widow with 3 children and a roof that was falling down, and she was the bravest, strongest, most determined person I had ever met. I fell in love with her courage before I fell in love with her, and I have never stopped loving either. He turned to Theresa, who had tears streaming down her face. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, a life worth living. Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment has mattered. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. To Kent and Theresa, Matthew said, raising his own glass, and everyone echoed the toast. Theresa stood and kissed her husband, and their children and grandchildren applauded, and the celebration continued into the evening with music and dancing and stories. Later, when most of the family had gone to bed and only Kent and Theresa remained sitting by the dying fire, she leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you. For what? For everything. For fixing my roof all those years ago, for staying, for loving me and my children. for building this life with me, for every day and every moment, for all of it. You do not have to thank me. It has been my privilege and my joy. Still, I want you to know that I see you. I see everything you have done and everything you are. You are a good man, Kent Dalton. The best man I have ever known. He held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. We made it, Theresa. We built something beautiful. We did. They sat together in the firelight. Two people who had found each other when they both needed finding, who had built a family and a home and a life out of nothing but hard work and love and determination. The roof Kent had built all those years ago still stood solid above them, weathered but strong, sheltering the family that had grown beneath it. Outside, the stars wheeled across the Colorado sky, infinite and eternal. Inside, the fire burned low, casting gentle light across the faces of two people who had loved well and lived fully, who had taken broken pieces and made something whole. And in the morning, they would wake together as they had done for 25 years and face whatever the new day brought, side by side, hand in hand, partners and lovers and friends until the very end. The years continued to pass, gentle in their progression. Kent and Theresa settled into the comfortable rhythms of a long marriage, knowing each other so well that words often became unnecessary. A glance across the room could convey volumes. A touch on the shoulder could speak of love deeper than any poetry. They watched with pride as their children built their own lives. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch work as Kent's joints began to stiffen with age, proving himself as capable a rancher as his stepfather had been. Emma's schoolhouse became a center of learning in Palisade, and parents counted themselves lucky if their children were in her class. Grace thrived in Denver, though she wrote long letters every week and visited whenever she could, bringing her growing family with her. Samuel, Robert, James, and Catherine grew into fine young people, each with their own personalities and dreams, but all sharing the solid foundation their parents had given them. They had grown up seeing what real love looked like, what partnership meant, what it took to build something lasting. On a crisp October morning, Kent and Theresa took a walk around the property they had worked for so long. Kent moved slower now, his steps more measured, but his eyes were still sharp and his mind clear. Theresa held his arm, not because she needed the support, but because she wanted the contact, the connection. "Remember when this was all falling down?" she asked, gesturing at the sturdy buildings, the well-maintained fences, the healthy cattle grazing in the fields. I remember thinking I had never seen a place more in need of help, or a woman more determined not to ask for it, she laughed. I was stubborn. You still are. It is one of the things I love most about you. They walked to the spot where the roof had been worst, where Kent had first climbed up with his tools and his determination to help. The roof was still solid, had been repaired and maintained over the years, but the original beams Kent had placed were still there, strong and true. "You saved us," Theresa said quietly. "That day you rode up with your tools and your kind heart, you saved us. I do not know what would have happened to me and the children if you had not come along. You would have found a way, you always do, maybe, but I am so very glad I did not have to. I am glad you came. I am glad you stayed. I am glad for every single day we have had together." Kent stopped walking and turned to face his wife, this woman who had given his life meaning and purpose. Her hair was silver now, her face lined with the marks of a life fully lived, but to him, she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her mending her son's jacket on the street in Palisade. "I love you," he said, simple and direct. "I have loved you from almost the moment I met you, and I will love you until I draw my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," she replied, tears shining in her eyes. "More than I ever thought possible. You are my heart, Kent Dalton. They stood together on the land they had built their life upon, holding each other in the morning sunlight, and the years fell away until they were young again, just starting out, full of hope and determination and love. Time moved forward as it always does. There were more grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. The homestead continued to thrive under Matthew's management, with Kent advising when asked but content to let the younger generation take the lead. Kent and Theresa spent their days in the gentle activities of the elderly, tending the garden, sitting on the porch, watching their legacy unfold in the lives of their descendants. On a warm summer evening in 1895, 3 decades after Kent had first ridden into the yard to fix a roof without being asked, he and Theresa sat on the porch as the sun set. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies worn by time and hard work, but their spirits still strong. "It has been a good life," Kent said, his voice soft. "The best life," Theresa agreed. "No regrets. Not a single one. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner. Think of all the years we could have had. We had the years we were meant to have, and we made the most of every one." The sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and gold. The land stretched out before them, fertile and abundant, worked by the hands of their children and their children's children. The house stood solid and strong, every beam and board a testament to their determination and love. "Thank you," Kent said, reaching for Theresa's hand. "For what?" "For letting a wandering cowboy into your life, for trusting me with your children, for building this beautiful life with me, for loving me. Thank you for stopping, for seeing what needed to be done and doing it, for staying when you could have moved on, for choosing us every single day." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear their family, gathered for Sunday dinner as they did every week. Voices and laughter, the sounds of children playing, the clatter of dishes being washed. "We did good, did we not?" Theresa asked. "We did very good indeed." Kent Dalton lived to be 76 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep with Theresa beside him, surrounded by the family he had helped build. His funeral was attended by half the county, all those whose lives he had touched with his quiet kindness and steady presence. He was buried on a hill overlooking the homestead he had helped save, under a sky as wide and blue as the wanderlust that had once driven him. Theresa lived another 5 years, missing her husband every day but finding comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together. She spent her final years telling stories to her great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had ridden into her yard one autumn day and fixed her roof without being asked, who had stayed and loved her and given her everything. When she passed at 81, she was laid to rest beside Kent, and their headstone bore a simple inscription. Together they built a life of love. The homestead continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation laid by Kent and Theresa. The original cabin, expanded and modified over the years, remained at the heart of the property, a reminder of where it all began. And sometimes, on quiet autumn evenings when the light slants gold across the fields and the wind whispers through the aspens, those who live there swear they can see 2 figures on the porch, sitting close together, watching the sunset over the mountains they loved. A cowboy and a widow, a wanderer and a survivor, 2 souls who found each other when they both needed finding and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their love story became legend in Palisade, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love begin with the simplest gestures. A roof built without being asked, a kindness offered without expectation of return, a choice to stay instead of wandering on. These small decisions, made with an open heart, can change everything, can build families and legacies that endure for generations. The homestead still stands, more than a century later, a testament to what two people can accomplish when they work together, when they choose love over loneliness, partnership over independence, commitment over convenience. The descendants of Kent and Theresa still farm the land, still maintain the buildings, still tell the stories of how it all began with a widow, 3 children, a failing roof, and a cowboy with a good heart who decided to help. And on the hill overlooking it all, 2 gravestones stand side by side, marking the resting place of 2 people who lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. Kent Dalton and Theresa Dalton, together in death as they were in life, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy alive in every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who carries their blood and their values forward into the future. It was a love story for the ages, built on the foundation of a roof that needed fixing and 2 hearts that needed healing. It was a story of second chances and hard work, of family and commitment, of choosing to build instead of walking away. It was the story of the Wild West at its best, when people helped each other not because they had to, but because it was right, when communities were built on mutual support and respect, when love could bloom in the hardest soil and flourish against all odds. And at the center of it all was a simple truth, that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with a cowboy, a hammer, and a determination to fix what was broken. Kent Dalton had fixed Theresa's roof that winter, but in doing so, he had fixed so much more. He had fixed her hope, her faith in humanity, her belief that good things could still happen. And she had fixed him too, had given him the home and purpose he had been searching for all those wandering years. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a love that would echo through the generations, a family that would carry their values forward, a homestead that would stand as proof that broken things can be mended, that winter always gives way to spring, and that sometimes, when you least expect it, a stranger can ride into your life and become your everything. The sun set on their story as it does on all stories, but the love they shared, the life they built, the legacy they left, these things did not end with their deaths. They lived on in every child who learned to be kind, because they were shown kindness, in every person who chose to help because they had been helped, in every family that stayed together through hard times, because they had seen what commitment looked like. Kent and Theresa's love story was not unique in its basic elements. Throughout the Wild West, there were countless widows who struggled, countless men who helped, countless families that were built from hardship and hope. But their story was unique in its details, in the specific shape of their love, in the particular way their lives intertwined and created something beautiful. And perhaps that is the real lesson of their story, that every love is both ordinary and extraordinary, that the simple act of showing up and helping can change the course of lives, that the choice to stay is sometimes the bravest choice of all, and that a roof built without being asked can shelter not just bodies but hearts, can protect not just from winter storms but from loneliness and despair. In the end, Kent Dalton was just a cowboy, and Theresa Ashford was just a widow, and they were just 2 people trying to survive in a hard land during a hard time. But they chose to do more than survive. They chose to live, to love, to build, to create a family and a legacy that would endure. They chose each other, again and again, through good times and bad, through plenty and scarcity, through youth and old age. And that choice, repeated daily over 3 decades, built something stronger than any roof, more enduring than any building. It built a love that lasted, a family that thrived, a story worth telling and retelling until the mountains themselves crumbled to dust. On the homestead that still bears their mark, life continues. Children play in the same yard where Emma and Matthew and Grace once played. Cattle graze the same fields that Kent and Theresa worked so hard to maintain. The house, expanded and modernized but still recognizable, stands solid against whatever weather comes. And sometimes, when the family gathers for holidays or celebrations, someone will raise a glass and say, "To Kent and Theresa, who started it all." And everyone will drink, honoring the memory of two people who proved that love can bloom in the harshest conditions, that families can be built from broken pieces, that a cowboy and a widow can create something beautiful out of nothing but determination and hope, and a willingness to trust in each other. Their story is complete now, their lives fully lived, their love fully expressed. The cowboy who built a roof without being asked found his home. The widow with 3 children and no roof by winter found her partner. And together, they built a life that was worth every hardship, every struggle, every difficult day, because they faced it all together, hand in hand, heart to heart, from that first autumn day when he rode into her yard until the final moments when they left this world behind. It was a love story. It was a Western story. It was a story of survival and hope and the power of simple kindness. It was the story of Kent and Theresa, and it was complete, and it was good, and it was enough.